Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Solitude Tarot. So, I wanted to let Spirit choose the topic tonight, and Spirit chose the topic of how to ground this connection. So, your connection with the person in your heart, how can you ground it? What is essentially what needs to happen here to sort of root that connection down? And that may be for the purpose of building a foundation for the connection. It may be for the purpose of preparing the ground for a future connection, whether you know who this person is or you're trying to call in someone who you can feel in your heart already. But maybe you have not met them or they have not come into your 3D material existence yet. And or possibly if you're in a bit of a situationship, maybe there's a need for how to ground in the connection within the connection itself as a sort of precursor to, like, whether it's for you to individually ground and sort of move away from pre-existing conflict, or whether it's you're looking to ground to bring something forth, or you're looking to ground within the connection itself, and as for the purpose of building it up to its next phase. So those are the various different meanings that I saw. So then I had a look at, this card is quite interesting as a pull for a topic from Spirit, because first let me show you the box. So this is the Rooted Woman Oracle. And as you will note, the box has this very card on it. And this card is actually the last card in the deck. Although it says 2, it's 2 of a series of 2 cards, more on that later, which are at the end of several different series of cards within the deck. And so this card has the meaning of grounding and rooting, but rooting in the sense of putting down roots. So it calls up it's sort of like, I don't know if you have already watched the alchemy reading from the other day, but it's that same sense of having, there was one reading where there was a winter and a summer in the 2 piles. And so the winter card talked about winter being like not a time of stasis, but a time when there's a lot of activity actually happening under the earth in preparation for spring. And so winter is this time of transformation, preparation, growth, like intense beginnings. So it's sort of like that Aries energy, but like way back in Capricorn season. And so, like this card talks about grounding and being rooted, not as an act of stasis, but as an active transformation. And so if you think about that, we think of roots going down and sort of holding a plant to the earth. But in fact, those roots, to be as tenacious as they are to the earth, they're growing. They're actively making more of themselves and, like going down and down. And although it happens at a pace that, we would have to use a stop motion setup in order to see with our eyes, or possibly even find interesting in, I guess I'm picturing a documentary. I mean, it's interesting in one's garden for sure, regardless of whether you can actually see a plant physically growing. But in any event, so there's intense transformation. So the plant is taking the sun, the water, and putting the cats are having their nighttime frolic and getting into trouble. It's transforming its own DNA by way of the catalyst of the sun and the water that it is taking in into making more of itself. And, it's like creating, and that is what is creating those roots that are going down. And like, it's not a process of stasis whatsoever. It's a very active, very dynamic process that is completely transformative. So, with that as our opening metaphor, my intention was I've got a person A, person B format for an energy check-in, and we're just doing, it's a collective reading if I didn't say that already. So my intention was for you to be here and your person to be here. I've already looked at the cards, there is some mirroring. I pre-shuffled and pulled, and so there is mirroring. So sometimes you might find that there's mirroring, but it could be to the extent of being flipped. So you might see your person here and you here, but my intention is for you to be here and for your person to be here. And so I'll be speaking in those terms, and you can inverse it if that's what you feel called to do. So again, with the energy check-in, the intention is, if you see yourself in the, at least one of the piles, then this is your reading. And so hopefully you'll see your person in the other pile as well. But at least if you can see your own energy in one of the piles, then you're in the right place. And if you have to stretch or force it, or you feel like I'm rambling too much, if there's something that's not quite sitting right with you, then click off. It's not your reading. And it's as simple as I can put it. If it's something that you're having to make fit, like if you have to force it in any way, then it's not your reading. So you can try a different reading. You can try a different reader. There's millions out there on YouTube. I don't know if it's literal millions, but it's literal thousands for sure. And you're sure to find someone whose reading style you click with. And so even if you're generally fond of these readings, but this one is not quite jiving, then click off and maybe pick a different reading, collective, or pick a card. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're gonna move your person over to the side here and just give ourselves a bit of space. I'm gonna flip over these cards. So we've got, to start with, we have from the Medicine Heart deck, we've got the Sacred Law of the Northwest, and we've got Cave from the Rooted Woman deck. We have Dolphin. I suspect that's going to be a little bit off the screen. Can't quite see it, but I'm just going to slide it up just in case. Oh, it looks like maybe we're good. Okay. And then we've got a couple of these cards for there's sort of like advice cards. And so we'll go over these. And then I'm going to move your cards to the side and we'll look at your person's energy. So we're going to start with the Sacred Law of the Northwest. So this card it's about koala medicine. And it talks about, I hope you can hear their little pitter-patter feet running through because it's awfully cute. That was Cosmos being chased. He is the chased. Dusky is the chaser. I just found out that Cosmos I met their mother recently. And it sounds like Cosmos was actually the runt of the litter, and which really explains his psychology in so many ways. But I'm happy to say that he's come a long way. And I think feels like a fully entitled member of the family. But he does still get chased by his brothers, both the dog and his brother cat. He's always kind of getting it from all sides. But at least he's big enough to hold his own now. And for a little while he was, I discovered after a while of having him that his breakfast was being poached by his brother. And he was quite a lot smaller, and I just thought it was genetics, but I started protecting his food in the mornings, and magically he became a big, huge, strong cat, just like his brother. So, lesson learned. And the thing about rambling as well is that when a reader is channeling cards, sometimes things like random cat chases come up and come into the reading, and I'm maybe not quite there with connecting them and pointing out how they relate to the topic of the reading, but they do. And it might be that you're seeing that right away, or it might be that someone else is, even if it's not a message for you. These are collective readings. And so, perhaps this is coming up as I'm discussing the card about sacred law and koala medicine. And so sacred law is, maybe there will be a tie-in, I'm not quite seeing it, but sacred law is about adhering to a sense of justice and rightness that in walking a spiritual path that may or may not be in step with the world around you, and about heeding your own inner truth and ensuring that you are not substituting. Oh my goodness, hey! Scratching what they should not. Are you gonna go investigate? Okay, go make sure they're taken care. You gonna chase them? You go chase the cats? Yeah. Okay. Have fun. So not substituting somebody else's moral opinions for your own, or having the strength to walk a spiritual path, even if it is out of step with the people around you, the society that you're living in, and having the strength, like the inner strength, to find out your path and walk that path without heeding naysayers around you, without being swayed away from it, even if it's completely contrary to everything else that is surrounding you at the time that you're feeling called to walk it. And then so koala medicine is about distillation or discernment, I would say. And there is some mirroring here with one of the other cards that we have not flipped over yet. So koalas, it makes the point that koalas eat toxic leaves that they then it takes a long time for them to digest. And so they spend a lot of time sleeping. They sort of co-regulate with trees, sort of burning off the heat. Like if they have excess heat, they can transfer that heat out to the tree and regulate their bodies and sort of, leave off what is not serving. And so basically the point was that I think something like 10% of the leaf is beneficial, and then the other 90% has to be cleared. And so that leaf is, sufficiently beneficial that it is their main diet, although they do eat other things. But their bodies have to rest. There has to be a lot of integration, like a significant amount of integration. So it sounds like they are awake for 4 hours and then sleep for 20. Or I don't know if they're sleeping for 20, but they sleep 20 hours out of 24. And and so it's a call to heed your own inner voice and walk the path of sacred law. And while, possibly having some toxic influences surrounding you, and having the discernment to distill out of those influences, that 10% of goodness or that serves you, and discarding the 90%. And so how can you root this connection? How can you ground this connection into the 3D? It's funny, that isn't how I was formulating it to myself, but those were the words that just came out of my mouth. And again, that doesn't happen by accident. And so for you, it looks as if letting go of what doesn't serve is part of it, but also having the discernment to identify, any toxicity that might be surrounding you, and give yourself the rest time, the downtime, the integration time to really integrate what does serve and release that, 90% of the dross that does not And now I'm sort of wishing I'd done this in a card A, card B format, but in any event. And then we have incubation, and this is reflecting the same message here. So it's even like interesting how the bears are looking quite similar. This is definitely not a koala. It looks like a brown bear, but just the, the bear face and the direction they're facing or looking. So this card makes the point that humans have gone into sacred caves throughout our history in order to communicate with spirit, in order to have the messages of one's guides or the other world. It refers specifically to the other world, so that the messages of the other world can come through. So it's sort of like quieting. I'm sorry, I'm finding these cats distracting. All of the pets are suddenly... Do you want to go outside? Okay. Side note, I edit my videos a fair bit. And I partly do it because I am a new reader. And there are times that I am figuring out what the cards mean, figuring out how they go together, or just shuffling kind of ad nauseum that are presumably boring to watch, or at least I get bored watching them when I'm editing the videos. And I assume that others would as well. So I do try and kind of fast forward and get to the point. So, when there are jumps in the video, it's really not anything exciting taking place. Although sometimes I do kind of put my foot in my mouth, and then the power of the edit. And, it does make me reflect on sort of AI and deep fakes and how easy it must be to do that stuff, because just by instinct, I'm quite good at making the audio flow when I do edits. And unless you happen to be looking at the screen right at that second and notice, that the candle flickers differently, you just wouldn't really notice it. I think, like, even I wouldn't notice it going back to the video later for some of the edits. Some of them are a little choppier, but anyway, refocusing. So we go into the cave in order to hear what is coming through from the other world. And with the idea that it is a sacred mission, it is a sacred task to bring yourself into a state where you can let those voices come through clearly without being distracted by the rest of human society and whatever other, and like maybe the demands that are placed on you day to day are demands that you've placed on yourself, and maybe you've, built up your life in a way that you enjoy and have sanctioned. But even if that's the case, there's definitely, there are things that pull us out of that sacred space, just, in terms of daily living and survival or care of others. Like my pets are going bonkers in the background. If my kids were here, they would be interrupting me every 3 seconds. That's another reason I edit the videos. Sometimes they come in and they want to know all about the card that's on the table, which is really sweet, and I like to encourage it, but then I edit those sections out later. But in any event, so those things kind of pull us out of our ability to hear, to create sacred space and to hear the messages coming through. And going into the cave is a way to protect that hearing, that sacred hearing, in the same way that pulling out the 10% of goodness and discarding the 90% of toxicity is a way to protect your own sacred space. So there's definitely a couple of messages here for you to use your discernment and heed your own inner voice, and also to be guided by what comes through when you protect that sacred space for yourself, the sacred space wherein you can actually hear your own guidance and the guidance coming through from your spirit team, shall we say. And with the dolphin, I wanted to read this out because I think because reading it out itself, like sometimes reading the words of the guidebooks, I'll just read it out and then I can explain this in a way that makes more sense because I'll be referring to the description here in order to explain it. So the dolphin, innately intelligent, healer, light, blessings. The gifts of the dolphin are beyond what our human minds can grasp. Dolphin personalities are often drawn to the healing arts as they are sensitive to the subtle and enjoy working on the level of spirit. It's easy for dolphin types to underestimate the impact they make in the world. These creatures play such an important role in the wheel of karma that coming in contact with a dolphin type will change the entire course of your day and thus your life. This card can also indicate a profound blessing is on the way. In balance, active healer, strong spiritual practice. Out of balance, underestimates own power. To bring into balance, like-minded spirits. So this is a call to walk a sacred path and let go of what is not serving. This is a call to consciously cut out other voices and prepare the ground so that you can have those voices that serve you come through. And then this card. So what I was trying to explain is I think the description itself goes beyond what the human mind can comprehend, or at least there's a resonance there that is operating beyond the level of the literal words. And that's, that is dolphin energy in my experience. Dolphins maybe as a symbol from indigenous traditions might be, bringing messages through from the dream time. But whatever your perception of dolphins, even just considering them as scientific creatures of the ocean, they are fascinating, they're playful, they can be scary, they're quite big compared to humans. But mostly they demonstrate an intelligence that is very similar to our own. If I'm not mistaken, this is definitely true of a lot of whales, but I believe dolphins are among them. So I think killer whales and dolphins is what I heard specifically about this. But their brains are, the part of their brains are bigger than ours, but the part of their brains that deals with intuition and sort of emotional intelligence, that part is specifically much bigger than in humans. And okay, hang on to you. And so when in balance, active healer and strong spiritual practice. So I think there's a call, in order for you to root in this connection, there's a call for you independently to root in your own spiritual practice or to get back into whatever your techniques are for creating space for yourself to allow those voices to come through and guide you. But at the same time, there's a call to play and to play with like-minded spirits. And if you're in a space right now of underestimating your own power, then this is the way to get back into that power. And once you do that, it seems to me that this connection, the rooting of the connection, will follow. So that's sort of your independent work. And then, there's some interpersonal work to be done here. This is not necessarily to do with your, the person in your heart, but it sounds like more like play within a community of like-minded folks. And so maybe there's connections to be made within your spiritual communities, for example, and a call to do that. But there's also just a call to lighthearted play. And, to basically, once you bring that back into balance, you will be that dolphin person who can change the course of another person's day or indeed their life. And then these two cards say, little moments of decompression can help cultivate expansion. So again, that's referring back to the rest of the koalas. So ensuring that that you're giving yourself time for integration, not just time to hear the voices, but then time to integrate. So, allowing rest, and that integration might happen when you're asleep. It might happen when you're asleep. It might happen through, techniques like journaling, meditating, but rest, I think, is a prime component. So like allowing your system to filter in a way that is beyond your conscious mind. Yeah. And so make sure you build that decompression into your practice or into your day. Take as much time as you need to get to know yourself, even if it's a whole lifetime. And so there again, I'm seeing a call to creating that space, and maybe this is a call to do it on an ongoing basis. So maybe you need a daily spiritual practice that is sacred, like that is your time. I had a friend whose mother would meditate Vipassana in the closet. They called it the closet. So her mother every morning and every night would go into the closet for an hour. And that was mom's time, and no one was to interrupt it. And, they grew up around that and all really respected and revered it, I would say, as a spiritual practice. And, and so allow yourself to, and by connecting with like-minded people as well, allow yourself to bring forth information about yourself through that process. Okay, so for your person, we have Mother of Star Nations. We have Peregrina. We have Peacock. And then we have 2 of these cards as well, which we'll come to. Hi. Oh, I think he might have just made a cameo. Mr. Fluffy Butt. Mr. Fluffy Butt, hi. All right. So when I was mentioning mirroring, there's some interesting parallels. So the Mother of Star Nations is, I want to read out a little bit of that guidebook. So there's a number of symbols in this card. We've got the white feather, which is symbolizing spirituality. We've got magnolias, the red magnolias. And for that, I'll have to rely on the book. And we've got chimpanzee medicine. Magnolias, red magnolias, hold the yin magnetic quality of attraction, wealth, love, peace, good fortune, and joy, and speak of, or in their role in the oracle, they speak of long-standing and far-reaching legacies that will stand the test of time. Of that within you which may seem delicate and fragile, but is actually incredibly strong and able to survive all manner of tests and challenges. And it talks about that being a process of distillation as well. And so, but getting back to the Star Nations part of this card, so the spiritual guardians that dwell as stars are not separate from humanity, but rather intertwined with humankind spiritually and genetically. While science can tell us that we are literally made of stardust, our hearts are born with an innate, intuitive recognition of our divine ancestry. For some, that will mean that we have literally evolved from certain star systems through numerous incarnations of the soul, until we eventually made our way into human form to share our spiritual legacy on this planet. For others, the sense of wonder when gazing at the stars may elicit an invisible tug of sacred connection that bonds us to human ancestors who gazed at the same stellar objects, and sensing the vitality and intelligence therein, received subtle spiritual dispensation of cosmic support. And so overall, this talks about how it is of benefit on one's path to hold open a space where messages can come through from the ancestors, whether those be Star Nation ancestors or human ancestors, but allowing So, whereas this is about sort of turning away from human society and kind of heeding one's own sort of intuitive sense of what is right, or intuitive adherence to sacred law, even if that doesn't make sense to the people around us. You know, having that sort of very strong inner moral compass of knowing that, you know, for example, being vegan is a great example. Like there are points when perhaps a person just knows that they cannot follow what their culture is asking of them. They simply cannot. It is contrary to, they can't do it without betraying themselves. And so that may be one example of where that occurs. Whereas this is a sort of converse in the sense that it's saying perhaps you've been used to acting as a lone wolf, perhaps your person, has been used to acting as a lone wolf, and there's a call to ensure that they're not so much in those lone wolf energies that they're not allowing support to come through. So sort of keeping the door open for support, and in particular, unseen support. Holding open the space so that unseen support can flow through easily. But they both speak of nonconformity. So to birth a star nation is to become inwardly and sacredly rebellious against the conformity-inducing fear perpetuated by mainstream consciousness that seeks to deaden and enslave, rather than vitalize and free, the soul. The antidote to nefarious agenda is spiritual awakening. Turn within to find a truth that cannot be accurately perceived in the shifting shadows of the outer world. Do not allow anyone or anything to derail you from that which spiritually illuminates your heart. And then chimpanzee medicine is a call to light, lightheartedness of playful presence, light as a symbol of knowledge and an open mind, cultivating a childlike state, curious, investigative, exploratory, to bring about creative evolution. Playing with possibilities can allow that space to open where solutions come through. So, you know, if you're over controlling situations in your life, and we're talking about your person, so if one is over controlling situations in one's life, then it's like you're foreclosing that spontaneous wisdom to come through. And whether you view that as your own intuition or your own sort of like being in the flow, or whether you view that, as this card is suggesting, as messages that are coming through to you from guides beyond the seen realms. If you are sticking too closely to your own sort of, you know, rigid path, your own idea of what your path should be in this sort of, you know, rigidly set out way, then you're foreclosing the spirit of play that would allow you to kind of end up in a receptive, spontaneous space where those messages can come through. So in both cases, there's a call to creating an openness that is fidelitous to one's own spiritual path. In this case, actually, it's more creating so there's a strong call to being fidelitous to one's own spiritual path as against the society that surrounds one. In this case, it's more of a closing to toxic messages, and this one's more of an opening to ethereal messages. But in both cases, it's like having the courage to take that step out of the mainstream in order to do that. And then there's a call to play with the dolphin, and there's a call to play with the chimpanzee. So there's some mirroring there. And this one is specifically about relationships. So this one is about sort of relationship with oneself. And this one is about openness to relationships. So the energies that you bring to relationships in the ways that are authentic to your soul genuinely make a difference. This is a time, and again, we're talking about your person. I keep saying you because I'm just reading from the book. But the oracle speaks of a time when relationships are of particular importance to your person's soul healing and spiritual awakening. There may be a need to learn how to allow themselves to be supported by others, working together for a common good, particularly if they have been more inclined to lone wolf tendencies in the past. And the healing process talks about a magnolia tree, and the roots of the tree reach deep into the earth, providing your mind with a sense of stability and presence. And then that allows the flowers to bloom. Peregrina is, so if you'll recall, I was saying that I tried to record the intro a couple of different times, and I can't remember what I did say versus what I didn't, but essentially I have this habit of picking up new decks and shuffling, doing, a washing machine shuffle, and ensuring that they're thoroughly shuffled, and then I will pull a card from the deck. And the first card that I pull is often the last card of the deck. And in this case, I wanted Spirit to choose the topic of this reading, and I had pre-shuffled all of the cards, and I picked that deck up and I shuffled it a little bit more. And then I always shuffle out cards. I never just open a deck and pull out a card. And in this case, I just cut the deck open to a spot and pulled out a card, and it happened to be this one, which is also the one on the box and on the guidebook, and like the eponymous card, but it's also the last card in the entire deck. And when I said it was one of, I think I said that in this, in the reading that ended up being recorded, or making it through. So it's one of a set of two cards that comes at the very end of the deck. And the first card of those two is Peregrina. And they're sort of opposite in meaning. This one would be like the world, and this one would be the fool. So one fool and then two world. And their descriptions are slightly opposite. But I did also notice that we've got 1, 2, and 3 here. This is 3 from a totally different set, but these two are from the same set within that deck. And so Peregrina, like the word peregrination, is the pilgrim, the heroine at the beginning of the journey. She doesn't know what she's looking for, but she knows she's looking for something. Off she goes, she's prepared, and she has a willingness to live in the present and to have no presumptions about the nature of what might follow. She has her companions. Looks like she's got Fox and Raven with her. And it refers to how each of us comes into the world according to ancient Greek lore with a soul guide, being the, I don't know how to say this word, I meant to look it up, but daemon or daimon. And the soul guide is always trying to help us remember who we are and why we chose to come here. It reminds us of our calling, the great gift that we came to offer the world in troubling times. This card reminds us that it is the ultimate goal. This card reminds us that this is the ultimate goal of our journey. We must be willing to detach from who we've been and what we might become before we can discover who we're really meant to be and what our work is in the world. So again, this is similar energy, talking about detaching from the world around us in order to heed the call of one's own soul. And so for both you and your person, there's really this call to get away from the voices of others and focus in, and I don't mean from each other's voices, I mean the voices all around you, that you're surrounded by just by being a living, breathing member of human culture or the society that you're in. And so this talks about being willing to sort of take the initial steps in that journey. This one is talking about the intense transformation that occurs as one, gets deeper into that journey. And in this case, it's sort of like dabbling, taking root. And for both you and your person, it looks like there's a need to hone in on your own spiritual knowledge and trust it. And trust it even when it seems to be taking you away from what other people are telling you is the truth or is right or is correct or is accurate, or and then, heeding your own voice in that and creating the space to have, like, some people might think you're crazy if you tell them that you're trying to create space for your spirit guides to speak to you. And that's, if you want to hear those spirit guides, if you want to give them the space to come through, you have to release whatever shame you have around that. You have to do that healing work and open that space in order to have those conversations. And if you believe that that can't happen because you've been told by other people that it cannot happen or that it's not real, or then you're foreclosing the possibility of it coming through at all. Like, you're closing it off. So of course it's not gonna be real for you if you're closed to it. And so this is talking about how your person needs to dive into that fool's journey and take those steps and, do it with their spirit guides in tow, as companions, not in tow, but as companions. And to trust in the journey. And then we've got Peacock. This is all, I'm always thinking I'll just get a couple of cards to get the temperature and then we'll get into it. I'm laughing at myself because I never intend to stay up this late or speak this much, but it literally says it in the description of the channel. And, if you find that you're having reactions of frustration, then I would invite you to sit with that and feel into what in yourself that's calling up and, where those feelings are coming from. But also to trust in the journey and trust that what is coming through for a reason. And it might not be your message. It could be as simple as, this is not your message. That is fine. We don't always necessarily click on exactly the right messages depending on the state that I don't mean to turn it into a judgment call. Like, it happens. I had a reading the other day from a reader I adore, who I find very tuned in and usually very prophetic and just very attuned to my energy as a person accessing a reading. But the other day I put on one of her readings and I was in, a good space and didn't feel any different from most other days. But it was like I couldn't choose between the piles, and then eventually I picked one. And I tried so hard to make it fit, and I was like, no, that is not me. That just does not fit. And so I chose, the pile that I thought I had wanted to choose initially. And it's same thing, same result. No, that is not it. And I went through 3 piles, and then eventually I put on the 4th one. I was like, might as well try the 4th one and see if there's anything there, or, maybe this just is not my reading. And I put in the 4th one, and it was that same clarity of like resonant truth coming through that spoke and was like a bell ringing out. And I had to go through 3 readings that were definitely not my reading to get there. So, that's why we do an energy check-in. And, no shade, no shame. If it's not your reading, it just is not your reading. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're feeling compelled to access a reading, it is quite likely that Spirit is wanting to give you some kind of message. And that's why, there's no shortage of readings out there on YouTube and beyond. So certainly see if you can access a different one and see what comes through. Okay, Peacock. Inner beauty, compassion, assimilator of anything. The beauty of peacock is unrivaled. It's easy to think it comes from the plumage, but the secret of the peacock is that the beauty resides within and extends outward indefinitely. This adept creature can assimilate or digest all experiences in life, so it does not harbor resentment, conflict, or past pain within its psyche. The peacock type is extremely rare. Not many of us have reached this advanced level of acceptance of the self and others. When in balance, confident, kind. When out of balance, can't digest situations. To bring into balance, meditation on navel. And so one thing I like about tarot decks, like animal decks, is that sometimes they do kind of pull through meanings that I would have associated with an animal, or that maybe our culture does, but sometimes they don't. And this is when, like, to peacock is not really considered a good thing. Maybe we need to challenge that and accept that it often can be a fucking fantastic thing. Oops. It can be a fantastic thing that speaks to someone's confidence, their artistic qualities. If you're putting that kind of energy into charming others around you, there is some kind of creative spark within you. And that's perhaps something to be celebrated. But, we have a post-Christian culture, still Christian for many people, but for those of us who don't identify with Christianity, we are still living with this sort of post-Christian ethos. And, if you view somebody's specialness as pulling other people away from God, then I can see how this would seem like vanity, as opposed to that person knows themselves. They know how to attract others. They know how to magnetize other people. They are proud of themselves. They are confident. They have a sense of style. In my view, these are all fantastic things. Anyway, back to the book. So what struck me about this description was that it is kind of the opposite of the koala. So we're talking about it. Well, actually, it's the same as the koala, with the distinction, like the koala can eat these toxic leaves, and then it takes what serves it, and it releases the rest. The peacock has the same ability to digest anything,